Hi, Mr. Right here, and welcome to this film in which I'll take you through the golden rules for transforming graphs. Now, transforming graphs is definitely a grade 8-9 topic, and it's one of those topics that you can crack as long as you get your head around these golden rules. Throughout the film, I will show you how I set these rules out in a flowchart, so at the end of the day, you can easily apply them in your exam. Let's start off with y equals any old function of x. Now, the first thing to establish is whether or not the change is inside or outside of the bracket. The change might be outside of the bracket. You might be asked to explore y equals f of x plus 6, or y equals f of x minus 7, or y equals 4 times f of x, or perhaps y equals a half of f of x. All of those changes are changes outside the bracket. And so all of these changes will be a change to the y coordinate. The graph will be altering up or down. The change will be vertical. The change is a change to the y coordinate. And what's more, the change will be the right way. I'll explain what I mean by that. In this case, the graph will be going up by 6. The y-coordinate will be increasing by 6. In this case, the y-coordinate will be decreasing by 7. In this case, the y-coordinate will be being multiplied by 4. And in this case, the y-coordinate will be being multiplied by a half or divided by 2. The change is as you'd expect. So the change is outside the bracket, so we know it's a change vertically, and we know that the change goes the correct way. Now, it may be that the change is inside the bracket. You might be asked to explore y equals f of x plus 6, or y equals f of x minus 7, or y equals f of 4x, or y equals f of a half of x. Now, all of these changes are changes inside the bracket. You can see that the plus 6, the minus 7, the 4, and the half are appearing inside the bracket. That tells you two things. The change will be horizontal. The change will be made to the x coordinates of the points. And because the change is horizontal, the change will be the wrong way. So in this case, the x coordinates will go down by 6. In this case, the x coordinates will be increased by 7. In this case, the x coordinates won't be multiplied by 4, they'll be divided by 4. And in this case, the x coordinates won't be multiplied by a half, they'll be divided by a half, which of course is the same as doubling. So the first question you have to ask yourself is the change outside the bracket or inside the bracket? Outside the bracket, vertical change the right way. Inside the bracket, horizontal change the wrong way. So here is my flowchart, or the beginning of my flowchart, that sums that up. The first thing you need to ask yourself is the change inside or outside the bracket? If it's outside the bracket, then it's going to be a vertical change, a change to the y coordinates, and we're going to make the change the right way. Is the change inside the bracket? If so, we're looking at a horizontal change, a change to the x coordinates, and we're going to change those coordinates in the wrong way, in the way we wouldn't expect. Now let's explore the second and final question that you need to ask. Now, the second and final question that you need to ask is this change an addition or subtraction change, or is it a multiplying change? In these cases, the change is an addition or a subtraction change. In that case, my graph is going to be translated. It's simply going to be picked up and plonked somewhere else. Or is the change a multiplicative change? In these cases, the change is multiplicative. So my graph is going to be stretched. And I would call a stretch by a fractional factor, I would call that a squish. But of course, the examiners would be expecting you to call it a stretch by a factor of a half, perhaps. So, the second and final question, is your change an addition and subtraction, or an addition or subtraction change, in which case we're dealing with a translation, or is your change a multiplicative change, in which case we're dealing with a stretch or a squish? Now, let's put that into our flowchart and see what it looks like. So here's the second part of the flowchart, and you can see we're asking ourselves, is the change an addition or subtraction, or is it a multiplying change? If it's a multiplying change, we're dealing with a stretch or a squish. And if it's an addition or subtraction change, we're dealing with a translation. Right, let's have a look at the whole flowchart, and then we'll have a look at a couple of examples. So get ready to copy down this whole flowchart. Right, so here's the entire flowchart. Why not pause the film and copy that down? And then when you're ready, hit play again, and we'll have a look at a couple of examples. Okay, so here are 4 questions for us to have a go at. Each of these 2 questions has got a part A and a part B, or a part 1 and a part 2. Pause the film and have a go, and then press play again, and watch me work my way through these. Just apply the flowchart slowly and steadily. Let's have a look at this question here. Now, in part A, is the change inside or outside of the bracket? It's outside of the bracket, so we're going to make the change to the y coordinates, and we're going to change them in the right way. The y coordinates are going to change as we'd expect. So the y coordinates are going to double in this case, because I've got twice the function, double the function, and multiply the function by 2. So I'm going to change the y coordinates in the direction I'd expect. I'm going to times them by 2. So let's have a look at a few points and multiply their y coordinates by 2. Let's have a look at this point here. Now this point has a y coordinate of 3. So its y coordinate is going to double. So now its y coordinate will be 6. Let's have a look at this point. This point has a y coordinate of 0, and double 0 is 0. So it's going to remain there. Let's have a look at this point. This point has a y coordinate of -1, so its new y coordinate will be -2. This point has a y coordinate of 0, so its new y coordinate will be twice 0, 0. This point has a y coordinate of 3, so its new y coordinate will be 6. So now all I need to do is to join up my new points. They're the ones with the crosses. And so my graph of y equals twice f of x is going to look like that. Okay, that is a stretch of a factor of 2 in the y direction. Now, let's have a look at the second one. Now, in part B, the change is inside the bracket. So we know we're going to be changing the x coordinates. It's going to be a horizontal change, and it's going to go in the wrong direction. So it looks as if we're multiplying by 2. So in fact, we're going to divide the x coordinates by 2. So let's take a few points and divide those x coordinates by 2. This point here has an x coordinate of 2. So if I halve that, it will have an x coordinate of 1. This point here has an x coordinate of 3. So if I halve that, it will have an x coordinate of 1.5. This point here has an x-coordinate of -1. So if I halve that, it will have an x-coordinate of 1/2. This point here has an x-coordinate of 1. So if I halve that, it will have an x-coordinate of 1/2. And this point here has an x-coordinate of 0. So if I halve that, it will remain at 0. So all I need to do now is to join up my new points, which are those ones with the crosses. So my new curve is going to look like that. And that is a stretch in the x direction by a factor of 1/2. Now let's look at the second question. Okay, now in part 1, this change is outside of the bracket. So it's going to be a vertical change, and it's going to be in the direction you'd expect. It's a change to the y coordinates in the direction you'd expect. And look at that, it's +3. So my graph is going to be translated by 3 units. Every point is going to move 3 units up. This one has a y-coordinate of 1. Its new y-coordinate will be 4. This point has a y-coordinate of -1. Its new y-coordinate will be 3 higher here. So my whole graph is going to be exactly the same, except it is translated by 3 units up. So it's going to look something like that. That's a translation of 3 units in the y direction, or it's a translation by the vector 0 along and 3 up. Now let's have a look at part 2. In part 2, the change is inside the bracket. It's going to be a change in the x direction, but it's going to be a change in the direction we don't expect. It's not going to go 3 in the negative direction. It's going to go 3 in the positive direction. So my graph is going to move 3 units to the right. So each of my points, its x-coordinate is increased by 3. So the new graph is going to look something like that. It has been translated by the vector 3, 0. 3 units to the right. Thanks very much for watching. I hope that you found that description of the golden rules helpful. This might be the sort of film that you want to watch one more time just to get those rules straight in your head. Your next step? Well, in this playlist you'll find more films to help you on the topic of transforming graphs, including a film in which I walk through a whole load of past IGCSE transforming graph questions. So you could move on to that film, download the questions, and work alongside me as we tackle those IGCSE questions on transforming graphs. Thanks for watching. See you in the next film.